Hi everyone, welcome to the 6th session in the St John's webinar series. This session is all about making a competitive Cambridge application. So in today's session, we are going to cover the following. We're going to have, first of all, a really broad overview of university applications overall and UCAS as well. I'm going to pitch this session at an assumption, I mean that you don't know much about UCAS. So if you already know a lot about UCAS university applications, then the first portion of the session might be really familiar to you, but I think it's important to ensure that we're all sort of on the same page about the basics of applying to university. A lot of what I'm saying is in the context of UK universities from UK schools, but I will link in the follow-up to this session in the email further links so you can explore for your particular circumstances if that's any different. So as well as an overview, we will look specifically at choosing your university courses. And then we'll have a look at the application timeline, which is specific to Cambridge. A small note here, a lot of the application timeline for Cambridge is quite similar to the application timeline for Oxford, and we'll cover a bit of the similarities and differences between the Oxford and Cambridge application processes throughout the session today. But most of the examples and most of the information I'm going to give you today is specific to Cambridge. And then finally, we will touch on ways that you can make a competitive application to Cambridge. I hope to give you some practical tips and advice, some resources that you can go away and pursue in your own time. So first of all, we're going to have an overview of UCAS itself. So UCAS stands for Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. It's essentially the online portal through which you make your applications to university. You can register and start your application for 2025 entry. So if you want to start your course in the autumn of 2025, so next year at the time I'm speaking now, but you can only submit a completed UCAS application from the 3rd of September this year onwards. So that's just a point to clarify at the start. Once you register on UCAS with your email address, you have to first answer a few basic questions, your year of entry, your level of your qualification that you will get, so undergraduate for the audience that I'm speaking to today, and then you will be taken into the dashboard and you can start your application in the hub. You have to complete all of the required questions, but you don't have to do that all in one go. So I'd recommend starting, saving your progress each time and coming back and completing it bit by bit, filling out all of the different sections as you go. Really important, you need to make sure that your email address is up to date and one also that you have regular access to. So that's really important because you don't want to miss any important information or updates about your application from UCAS. And you need to input your school's buzzword or passcode so that they can then add your teacher's reference. So that sort of links your individual application to your school or college if you're applying as a current student at school or college. What I've linked at the bottom there, the hyperlink, is an overview of UCAS Hub and how to get going with your application on UCAS. When you get a copy of the slides after the session, you can click through all of the hyperlinks in these slides. So what about adding university course choices then? So you have 5 slots to fill. You can apply for up to 5 universities or courses. That's what I mean by 5 slots to fill in UCAS. Really important to note that there's an early UCAS deadline for Oxford, for Cambridge, and for most medicine, dentistry, and veterinary medicine courses. This year, if you're applying this year by the October deadline, so it's always an October deadline, this early UCAS, Oxbridge, and medical course deadline. This year, it's 15th of October, 6 p.m. UK time. One note about if you're applying for medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine, and veterinary science courses, you can only apply for up to 4 courses in medicine or dentistry or veterinary medicine or veterinary science. And your 5th choice has to be something like biology. So that's an example of, it's not medicine, but it's a related course. You can add choices with different deadlines later, but don't forget that you can only have 5 choices in total. When you're applying via UCAS for your undergraduate degree, you can't apply to both Oxford and Cambridge, and you can't apply for more than one course at either Oxford or Cambridge. That's a really important point to clarify at this stage. Most other universities, they will let you apply to multiple courses at that institution, but you need to check with them directly. What I've linked at the bottom of this slide are the 2025 entry application deadlines for UCAS. So have a look in your own time at the UCAS page there. Next, replying to offers via UCAS. So what this slide does is explains essentially firm choice and insurance choice. This might be familiar, these terms might be familiar to you, but it's useful, again, as I said at the start, to make sure we're all on the same page. So your firm choice on UCAS is essentially your first choice. It's where you would want to go or what you would want to study, the uni or course respectively, that you'd most like to go and do. If you accept a conditional offer and then you meet the conditions of that offer, so it's usually 3 A-level grades, specific A-level grades maybe in certain subjects, then you have a confirmed place. Your second choice, your insurance choice, it's the course or the university that you'd want to go to if you didn't meet the conditions of that firm choice, right? That first choice. Obviously, you can only have an insurance choice if your firm choice is a conditional offer. If your insurance choice itself is a conditional offer, so if there are conditions, you have to achieve certain grades attached to that insurance choice, the offer that you get there, you need to meet those conditions in order for your place to be confirmed. So you have one firm, one insurance. If you accept an unconditional offer as your firm choice, then you've got your place. So you wouldn't, in that case, have an insurance choice for obvious reasons. The link at the bottom of this slide, another UCAS webpage, but this time it's specific about the reply deadlines for your offers on UCAS. So have a look there for the information. Okay, next part of this session, choosing your course. These are some tips, some general guidance when you're thinking about making those up to 5 UCAS choices for your universities and your courses. These are some really good starting points to think about. So take the entry requirements, both the grades at Cambridge, we have on our web pages typical minimum offer levels for our courses. And also, as well as the grades, have a look at the required or essential and the recommended or desirable subjects, and really take those into consideration. So you're aiming for courses that are attainable for you. Make sure that you're reading up on the course content, the details, of what you will study, how you will study, and how you'll be assessed as well. So modules, the assessment methods, because the course name or the title, it won't tell you everything. And it can be quite different. You can find that one course at one university, which is actually with the same name as another course at another university, but if you compared them side by side, you would see that there are quite significant differences. And you have to think about what you would like to study for 3+ years. So make sure you're looking in detail at the different courses on offer. I've linked there the career service webpage called Using Your Degree. And the reason I have is because sometimes it's really helpful to think backwards in a sense. So thinking about your career considerations at the stage where you're at now, you might have firm ideas, you might not have any firm ideas at this stage. It's totally fine to be anywhere on that spectrum of thinking about what you would do post university, but it can be really useful to look at what the graduates of the course or courses that you're thinking about applying for and studying, what they went on to do, right? So that can be quite an interesting way of thinking what course might be right for you. So have a look at the career considerations, the Using Your Degree, on the careers webpage. But remember that there isn't always, and there needn't always be a linear path. An example I like to use is you don't have to study law at undergraduate level in order to practice law and have a career in law. You can do a graduate conversion in law, for instance. So make sure you're thinking really broadly and taking everything into consideration. This is particularly the case in terms of arts and humanities courses, this next bullet point. Make sure you're exploring related courses. So helpfully, on a lot of prospectus web pages, course pages for universities, you will see often a box at the bottom of the web page that says, if you like this course, basically, have you thought about another one? So this is particularly the case for arts and humanities courses. There are a lot of related degrees and related courses. Some you might think, okay, if I like history, then you naturally might think, well, history at university might be for me. But in fact, there are loads of related courses in terms of different periods, different literature that you might study, different approaches. You might find that instead of history at university, your course choice is something perhaps more specific, like classics, for instance, or Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic. So make sure you're keeping your mind open. Even if at this stage you're pretty sure as to what you want to study, still have a look in those little related courses boxes on the web pages. Really important to remember that all your university or course choices will have the same personal statement. So through UCAS, your UCAS personal statement, that will be read by all of the universities and courses that you're applying to. So make sure if you're applying to slightly different courses, or maybe courses that involve different subject areas, just make sure that your personal statement is not specific to just one course or one university. We have a session in the webinar series later this year specifically about personal statements. So I'll leave discussion of that to then, but you're welcome to ask me questions at the end of the session if you want to know more about that. And then the last two are also really crucial to remember. There are lots of opportunities available to you, both in person and online, to help support your course choice, to help you make that decision for yourself. And crucially, it is an informed decision. It should be something that you're making with all the information, and you're making it for yourself. You're not studying the course that you think your aunt or your uncle wants you to study, or the course that all your friends seem to be applying for. It's really important that this decision is for you and you've taken all of these considerations into account. So we have the open days coming up at Cambridge next week, as I'm speaking now, 4th and 5th of July. There are lots of online tasters. We also have some Q&A sessions online at St John's, our subject admissions clinics. A lot of you will be signed up to those already, but I'll include a link in the follow-up email if you'd like to sign up to those opportunities. Okay, I've got a little quiz game, I suppose. So thinking about what we've covered so far, the guidance about course choice, the application requirements of what you can do in terms of your UCAS choices, I want you to have a go at answering, just in the chat box, which ones work. So I've got a few, I think 3 different sets of possible UCAS course choices, but I've left a few red herrings or glaring errors in some of them. So I want you to look at each of them and tell me in the chat box which ones work and why or why not. I'll give you a moment to have a think about this first one. So thinking about both the typical offers or the minimum offer levels, which are listed there, thinking about the course choice for each of those 5 course choices, and then thinking also about the institutions as well. I'm just going to have a look in the chat. Yes, I think most of you have spotted my very obvious red herring there, which is that I've put both Oxford and Cambridge, and as we've mentioned, you can't apply to both of those institutions. What does work, leaving that aside for a minute, what does work about the 4 medicine and then 1 non-medicine? I've given the game away there, haven't I? But yeah, that's my point basically, is what we said before. You have up to 4 of veterinary medicine or dentistry or medicine, and then your 5th has to be related. So biological sciences, biomedical sciences, pharmacology, there are lots of different options that I can think of there. Okay, what about number 2 then? What works or doesn't work about these proposed UCAS course choices? I'm looking in the chat box. So what do we think? So I've got a few responses here. People seem to think that On the whole, it would work. Yep, a good mix of the offer levels, of the grades that you'd be needing to attain at a minimum level in order to be a competitive applicant for these courses, that sort of step up to make sure you've got choice, to make a firm and an insurance choice. So yeah, what about the subjects, the course choices? What do we reckon? Similar subjects. They are different subjects, of course. Some of them um, English and history, some of them they're English literature. But what might you put in your personal statement that would mean that your one personal statement through UCAS would actually be applicable to both English and history and English or English literature in this example? Why might that work? The overlaps between the subjects. Yeah, absolutely. So you'd have to think about, I mean, for an obvious point, the fact that universities offer the combination of English and history as a degree that you can study. You know, there are lots of different joint honours or dual courses that you can study. So there must therefore, that's telling you something, right? There must therefore be an intrinsic connection between these two subjects. Absolutely. People have come up with some really great ideas in the chat. Thank you. So you might think about literature within historical context, author's context, the reception of literature throughout different periods of history. I'll stop there before I start thinking about. I'm a humanities student, so I could go off and talk about that for a while. But yeah, so that's the point that I'm trying to make with those options there in number 2. Okay, so number 3, what do we reckon here? I'll let you pop your answers in the chat for just a moment. Okay, what have you been putting in the chat then? Yep, we've got great. So we've spotted there's, in this case, Cambridge. So there isn't the issue that we had in the example that I gave you at the start, number 1, where we had both Oxford and Cambridge. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, the distribution of those grades, those minimum offer levels where you're trying to reach. Yeah, subjects all closely related, all the courses. Yes, the theme that sort of runs throughout of politics. Absolutely. Some have said maybe perhaps too broad for the personal statement. Can anyone think of ways that a personal statement could be constructed that would ensure that all of these courses were sort of covered? Yes, indeed, really good points there. There's must be reasons why they've picked these certain courses at these certain institutions. Is it the case that that institution that's the closest match, or is it the case that they've looked at the specific details of the course and they've gone, actually that course, not the seemingly matches by the name alone course is the right one for me, but maybe they've done some further research. That's what this initially suggests to me from this hypothetical example. Yeah, so thinking about the international aspect here, because we've got European in one, international in another. So what we're trying to consider here, I guess, is about interdisciplinary links between subjects, right? So these courses all exist, they're all really broad. Chances are, when you're studying courses like this, I mean, using the Cambridge course as an example, human, social, and political sciences, and this goes for most of our courses as well, you start out with quite a broad foundation. You've got compulsory modules in your first year, and then once you've decided which ones you want to really focus on and specialize in a sense, you would then pick. So you'd sort of be on one track. So you could pick the more international relations, political track, or you could pick the more sociology track. You know, it's what you make of it, essentially. Okay, excellent. I have got the answers revealed here, but that concurs with what we were discussing, so that's good. Okay, this next slide, this is an overview of what we're looking for. This is probably the most common question that I get asked is, How can I make my application stand out? What are you looking for? How can I be a competitive applicant? A lot of the following bullet points, the pieces of advice, are really broadly applicable to competitive institutions, so academically competitive or high tariff, as we sometimes call them, universities. But I'll talk specifically where appropriate about Cambridge examples. So at Cambridge, we're looking for students who have a real, genuine interest and informed enthusiasm, I like to say, for the chosen subject. They can demonstrate that they've got the core knowledge, the key understanding and technical fluency, perhaps. So that's in the case of languages, for an example, they've really got that solid basis. They understand their subject. They can demonstrate to us that they are interested and would thrive at university level, studying this subject in more depth and being an independent researcher as well. We're looking for students within their sixth form or their school cohort who are among the most able and committed within that cohort, and also students who are taking the initiative to go further. So they're not just content with what AQA or OCR or any other exam board determine that particular subject to be and the syllabus that is defined as such. They use things that they've covered in class, and they sort of go further. Their curiosity is piqued, and they take the initiative themselves to delve further and do what we call supercurricular exploration. We will cover that in a little later in the session. We're also looking for students who are expecting to place at the top of their cohort in their final year exams. Getting grades or looking to achieve grades and being predicted grades that are likely going to exceed our typical offers, our minimum offer levels. If you look on our course pages on our website, what you'll see is a really helpful paragraph or couple of paragraphs which tell you in recent cohorts, the students who were successful with their applications for that course, what they took in terms of A-levels, the subjects, and what they got in terms of the grades. And what you'll see, particularly for the STEM courses, is that high proportions of students are getting multiple A stars. They are exceeding what we call the minimum offer levels for that particular course. So we're also looking for students who are able to learn independently and think critically and analytically. And these are the sorts of skills that you can hone through your own studies, but also through supercurricular exploration and doing specific activities such as competitions or EPQs. I will cover a little bit later the post-competition, which might be relevant for a lot of you. You might have already started on your academic research posters. So do let me know if that's the case. We're also looking for students who would thrive with the demanding workload here at Cambridge. It's similar at Oxford as well. In terms of contact hours, so your supervisions or tutorials, your small group discussion-based sessions, your classes or seminars, so slightly bigger sessions, and your lectures. And then if you've got any practical lab sessions as well, contact hours, that sort of covers the whole of what I've just said there, plus your own independent study. We would expect that for students here to be totaling around 40, 45 hours per week. Our terms are 8 weeks long. It's the same at Oxford as well. So we're looking for students who would really thrive with that level of workload. For medicine, really, veterinary medicine, and to an extent, architecture and design as well, because of the different accreditations and the vocational links with those subjects, we would also be looking for that vocational commitment as well. So where relevant, the subjects I've mentioned there, we'd also be looking for students who can demonstrate that vocational commitment. Now, what's not relevant, crucially, we're not looking, there's no one type of student in terms of background, personality. I will cover this in the slide that talks about interviews as well. And the last point there, where I've said irrelevant extracurricular activities, the reason I've said this is because a lot of our students do a lot of extracurricular activities. So I'm not trying to say that extracurriculars are not something that you should aspire to. And a lot of students here continue with things that they've enjoyed doing in their school years, but a lot of students also take up fantastic opportunities that are often only possible because they're at university and they've got these new opportunities through societies, through clubs, whatever that may be. But in terms of our admissions decisions, those are based on academic criteria. So That's an important thing to mention. So when I say irrelevant, I mean extracurricular activities that don't have any relevance to the course or subject area that you're an applicant for. So what makes up a Cambridge application? I've split this into two halves essentially to look at what you would submit through UCAS and then the specifics for Cambridge applicants as well. So through UCAS, we have a school or college teacher reference. This is really important to us because your teachers know you really well and they can really help us understand you as a student, you as a learner, and put a lot of information into context for us. You also give us a lot of general information, personal circumstances, educational history, all of that detail about your educational history, essentially. That is through the UCAS form. Your academic record, so your grades in public examinations, so GCSEs and equivalent, we get that through UCAS. And then, of course, we've already mentioned it, the personal statement as well, which goes to all of your up to 5 UCAS choices, the same one. What's Cambridge specific then? So it's the bottom half, essentially, of this list here. We have some additional forms that we ask you to fill in. Some of them are optional, such as there's the extenuating circumstances form. I can link the web page about that form on this slide. The My Cambridge application questionnaire, that's something that you have to submit to make a valid application to Cambridge. That essentially asks for more information about what you've put in your UCAS. So it gives us even more information about your A-level studies. Interviews, admissions tests, and written work samples. I will come to these in the following slides, but before I do, the reason why we have these additional requirements, these requests for additional information, is to ensure that we have a complete, accurate, full picture and consistent picture as well of every applicant, because we assess you individually, we assess you contextually, and we assess you holistically as well. So all of the different elements come into play when we're making our assessments, and we put all of them into context. We're not ever looking at one thing just in isolation. Contextually is hyperlinked on my slide there, hopefully helpfully for you later. It links to the use of contextual data in admissions decisions webpage. It's a long webpage. It's very useful for you to look at if you're interested in understanding a little bit more about how we use contextual data. And then at the bottom, the box at the bottom, what I said earlier in relation to extracurriculars, this comes back to that. So our admissions decisions, just to reiterate, they're based on academic criteria and broadly defined. It's these three: academic ability, academic potential, and academic curiosity. So those are the three. Academic curiosity relates essentially to your supercurricular, your subject exploration. Okay, I'll just pause for a moment because I need a drink of water, so bear with me. Okay, I'm back, refreshed. This application timeline puts all of those elements into context before we go and look in detail at things like admissions tests, interviews. I've got a sort of step-by-step process. The hyperlinked box of text box, sorry, at the bottom, really good web page to have a look at if you're not already familiar with this dates and deadlines web page on our applicant-facing website. Then have a look at that one after the session. It's literally got what it says on the tin. It's a timeline of important dates, important deadlines relating to submitting elements of the application process, registering for admissions tests if relevant. So have a look at that for all the details. I've pulled out a few of the really key details from that, but that webpage will be the most up-to-date and accurate information for all the specifics that you need to know. So typically throughout year 12, but also these considerations can start earlier than that, you would be thinking about your course choice. You'd be thinking about if Cambridge is on your radar, if Oxford's on your radar. You'd also be thinking about college choice as well. We covered colleges in an earlier session, so have a look on the playlist link for these webinars to have a look at that session. And then also crucially, you need to check when the registration deadlines are. If the course you're applying for has an admissions test that you have to register in advance for. So I will cover that in a later slide, but the reason that it's step 3 is because a lot of these deadlines for registering for these tests that you have to take as part of your application for particular courses at Cambridge A lot of these deadlines are actually earlier than what we call the early Oxbridge deadline, the UCAS submission deadline, which is, as I mentioned earlier, 15th of October this year at 6 p.m. UK time. Once you've submitted through UCAS, you would then have, and this is specific to Cambridge, additional application forms that you need to submit. So the My Cambridge application or the My Cam app, you would submit that by the week after the UCAS submission deadline. So it's by the 22nd of October this year, 6 p.m. And then the next step, you would submit any samples of written work that were required as part of your application, or you'd take any admissions tests that were again required as part of your application. That typically happens October to November time. It varies. Interviews, which again we'll come to in more detail, but just to put them in their chronological context, I suppose, they happen in the first 3 weeks of December, typically. Interview formats for 2024, there's a web page that goes into detail about that. At St John's, we're interviewing online this year, but you can have a look at the web page for interviews. It's got lots of really useful guidance and advice. And essentially, every interview, no matter the format, is assessing the same thing. And we'll come to that in the interview slide in just a moment. And then you would get your decision. So we tell you if we're giving you an offer or not. That would be in January, mid to late January. So it's quite seemingly quite compressed from step 4 onwards. If you go from that submission deadline in mid-October through January, it seems to be quite a sort of a compressed process, but a lot of these things you're doing in advance, whether that's considering your courses, thinking about your choices, preparing your application, of course, you're drafting and redrafting your personal statement throughout the build up before you submit, of course, and a lot of the stuff has to happen earlier, like the admissions test registrations, if that's relevant for you. So a little more detail about pre-registration required admissions tests. I'm just going to pause for water again. Okay, so I've got an overview here taken from the dates and deadlines webpage that I linked on the previous slide, but these are the pre-registration required admissions tests for Cambridge. For medicine applicants, you need to take the UCAT, the clinical aptitude test, the UCAT. For that one, you need to register for that test by the 19th of September, and you would take the test in a window. There's a test taking window for this one, this UCAT. You take that between the 8th of July and the 26th of September. Details on registration and test centres and everything else about these admissions assessments, all on these web pages that I've hyperlinked for you. For law, it's the LNAT that you'd need to take if you're applying to Cambridge to study law. You would need to register by the 15th of September for that one, and you take the test again. There's a window between 1st of September and 15th of October. For chemical engineering and biotechnology, which is a course at Cambridge, engineering at Cambridge, natural sciences at Cambridge, and veterinary medicine at Cambridge, for all of those science courses, you take the science test, which is the ESAT, the engineering and science test. But that one you need to register by the 16th of September, and you would take that on either the 15th or the 16th of October. So those have specific test dates. And then finally, the maths test, which is called TAMUA, this is for economics and computer science applicants. So the TAMUA, you need to register by the 16th of September, and you would take that test on either the 16th or the 17th of October. What I've not included on this page, because it's slightly different, is the test for maths applicants for Cambridge. That's called the 6th term examination paper step. That is a test that you take when you take your A-levels in year 13. So I will link in the follow-up to this session. You'll get the slides, you'll get the recording link. I can see a few questions about that, so I will email that to you shortly after the session, and I'll link the STEP support webpage in that, because it's not the same as these tests, but it's important to be aware of that if you're applying for maths. So how would you prepare for these admissions tests? So what these tests are for, the reason why we have these tests is because we need more information about each individual applicant for these courses and subjects. We need to know how you approach problems, how you approach tasks and questions. This really helps us assess all of the candidates who apply to us who have brilliant and very similar grade profiles. So it's another piece of the puzzle to give us that full holistic jigsaw puzzle piece complete image, if you follow my strange metaphor there. We need it because it's one of the elements of the application to allow us to make our assessments. These tests are designed to be challenging. So it's really important that you know that going into it, and you prepare by practicing and familiarizing yourself with the rubric of the exam, the admissions test, just like you would for your other A-levels, etc. So you practice using past papers, follow the guidance on the website. Crucially, practice in timed conditions for these admissions tests, and revising your current subjects, the content, the skills related to those subjects will be really useful preparation for these admissions tests, whatever's relevant for you, whichever subjects for whichever course, what you're taking will be helpful in terms of the content and the skills. So don't see these admissions tests necessarily as something really separate in terms of the preparation. See them as part of your studies, your preparation, your whole university application journey. And make sure, as I have said, but I want to say it again because it's really important, that you check the date by which you have to register for these tests if they're relevant for you, these tests, and keep up to date on the university admissions test web pages, which I've linked the main page there at the bottom. Okay. So, what are Cambridge interviews like? Typically, you could expect to either have 2 interviews at approximately 25, 30 minutes each for each interview, or you could expect to have 1 interview of around 40, 45 minutes. You will be informed, if you're invited to interview, you'll be informed of that, the format, and how many interviews you will have as well. These will be conducted by usually 2 per interview, subject specialists. So there'd be usually 2 interviewers, in each interview. But all of these details vary by course, and you will receive these pieces of information ahead of your interviews. What interviews are? They're essentially academic conversations. They're basically interactive admissions tests. Essentially, they're dialogues. They aren't a series of trick questions. They're not a test of what you look like, what you sound like. They're assessing your aptitude for the style of Oxbridge teaching and learning and the chosen course that you've picked. They're also looking for you to demonstrate your informed enthusiasm for the subject and core knowledge, core subject skills. So all of the things that we covered when I was going over what are we looking for in our applicants, the interviews are testing that in an interactive dialogue format, essentially. So what can you expect at a Cambridge or indeed Oxbridge interview? A lot of this advice is really relevant for interviews at Oxford and Cambridge more broadly. You can expect to expand on elements of your application. So you might get questions about your personal statement. This is more likely in the arts and humanities, but it's very, very good in terms of interview preparation to make sure that you are familiar with what you put on your personal statement and that you have read and explored beyond what you have put on your personal statement. Because often the questions will be, what else have you read, or have you explored or discovered anything recently that might challenge what you've put on your personal statements? So that sort of springboard for discussion, that can often come from your personal statement, but it's not necessarily going to come up in your interview. You can also expect, so it's a good idea to prepare to be able to do this, you can expect to respond critically to new, unfamiliar ideas, information, different sources, textual sources, visual sources, graphs, data sets, statistics, something that you haven't seen, an image, a picture, and you're expected in that instance, when you're faced with this, what we call an unseen stimulus, we expect you to apply what you already know to this unfamiliar problem, this unfamiliar idea, or the arguments or the themes or what have you that are being presented in this unseen stimulus. We're looking essentially for you to demonstrate intellectual flexibility and logical reasoning skills. So can you present an argument that's logical? All of these skills that you'll be practicing and honing as a university student. We're just sort of seeing how you get on with that, essentially. You can expect also, if needed, to receive guidance from your interviewer. So if you're not sure on exactly the question that they've asked you can absolutely ask them to clarify what they're asking you, and you can tell them if you're not sure about something as well. That's actually probably something that we definitely recommend. It's important that you don't sit there and not say anything, because as I said, these are dialogues, these are conversations, these interviews. The interviewers want to hear from you. They want you to perform at your best. They're not looking to catch you out. They want to understand how you would approach a particular question, a maths question, or a particular literary source, whatever it may be, and it's always going to be relevant for your subject area, of course. They want to understand the thinking person inside. That's essentially the key message for interviews. Now, finally, related to interviews, so that's why I've put it at the bottom of this slide, there are some Cambridge courses that involve an admissions test that you would take shortly before your interview. This varies by college and course, and the college that would be interviewing you would contact you with the details about this, what we call a college admissions test. So have a look at that webpage for more information about what might be relevant for you and the courses you're applying for. So some more guidance here on how to prepare for interviews. So in terms of STEM interview preparation, revising course relevant content from what you're studying at school, but engaging and exploring beyond the curriculum as you have done to put your personal statement together and to be a competitive applicant. We want you to continue with that in your preparation for interviews. Practice problem solving out loud, solo, on your own, and in small study groups with your peers. So can you talk through how you would solve a particular science question? What formula do you need? What rules do you need to apply? What ways could you solve this question, essentially? So explaining the process of your own thoughts and your approach to that out loud, really crucial that you practice that. You don't want to be in an interview and this is the first time that you're sort of walking someone through step by step, line by line, how you would solve that equation, for instance. So make sure you're practicing out loud. That habit, building that habit of talking through these problems and how you would solve them, that's really crucial here. Some general advice then for arts, humanities, social sciences interviews. Again, revising course relevant content from what you're studying at school, but continuing to engage and explore beyond the curriculum, building off what you've done to put your competitive application together. And then for these subjects, what would be more relevant in terms of preparation is practicing different materials, sources, formulating different arguments, thinking about how you would respond, what evidence and ideas you would need to respond critically and analytically, how you would justify your point of view, practicing that intellectual flexibility and that logical reasoning, all of those skills that we're looking for at interview. And again, any written work that you've submitted, I've not mentioned written work, so I'll pause just to explain that very briefly. Typically for a lot of our arts and humanities courses, we might ask you to submit one or two classwork essay examples for us to get, again, a better sense of you as a student in that subject. So if that's relevant to you, if you need to submit written work samples, then the information will be on the webpage for you. But that's also something to bear in mind. It might come up in your interview. They might ask you a question about your personal statement. So that's a possibility. So really, overall, practicing how you would respond to unseen texts, unseen materials, thinking about those arguments and ideas in them. On this slide, I've got an array. It's not an exhaustive array, but it's a good range, I think, of different resources that are available to you, often through websites or signing up, subscribing to different journals, different mailing lists. Lots of hubs of resources here. So things like HE Plus is a hub of all different resources and activities that you can get your teeth into under each of the courses at Cambridge, so you can have an explore of that if you haven't already. Lots of journals, lots of open access journals online and research article repositories as well. There are documentaries, podcasts, I've got a few examples there, and some really useful banks of science and maths questions. So things like, I want to study engineering, that's a really useful website for you. So what you're doing by exploring your subject using these different resources, you're preparing a competitive application for university, and that's because you're demonstrating this intellectual interest in your subject, this informed enthusiasm, this critical thinking, independent research, a university level approach to your subject, essentially. So that's what subject exploration is all about. Why would you make this a habit? I've got a few points here. So it helps you with your current studies, your current revision efforts. It puts things essentially in a bigger context. It sort of helps satisfy your curiosity of where that idea or where that discovery or invention, whatever it may be, where that fits in with the bigger discipline that is the subject that you're looking into with this subject exploration. It also is really fun. It helps you find new things that you didn't know existed sometimes, different authors, different texts, different uses of materials, everything like that. So you're discovering a lot more. So it should be a really good litmus test of whether that subject is right for you, is whether that supercurricular exploration is really enjoyable for you. It supports your university applications because it gives you that taster of what it might be like to be that university level student of the subject. And it helps you make those course choices. So it helps you decide what you want to study at university, what would be right for you to study for 3+ years. At the bottom of this slide, the hyperlink there, that is a useful web page on practical advice for how to improve your application. I think I've also repeated it on this page as well. It's a really good web page for you to go to. You scroll down, see your particular subject or subjects, and there's some resources and activities that are linked there to help you with this subject exploration. A couple things to end on before I pause for questions in the last 10 minutes or so that we've got. CAM Guides. It's a really useful resource from the University of Cambridge Libraries. It's an online resource that you can access right now. You don't need a login for it. The hyperlink is right there. It's a way to help you develop academic skills like reading academic articles, note-taking, how to cite properly and not plagiarize, which is really useful for you to get to grips with at this stage as a prospective undergraduate, as an applicant, if not just for the fact that if you're submitting for essay competitions or poster competitions as an applicant, you need to have the secure and sound knowledge of how to cite and how to put a bibliography together. So those sort of academic skills, you can go to CAM Guides for that. And at St. John's, we have a poster competition. So there are lots of different competitions that you can enter as part of your application process to help things like EPQs are an example of this, right? This independent research project, a super curricular opportunity for you. So have a look if you haven't already at our poster competition webpage. The deadline is in early August, so there's still time for you to think about your submission for that. Okay, that brings me to the end of the slides. So I will just stop the recording here. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can get in touch with me. The email address is on the screen there, and I can send you a copy of the slides and answer any questions that you have.